Welcome to Spiritual Dialogues with Father Udon de Castro. We are here at Cariana Lay Monastic Community. I'm your host, Brother Lodi. With us is Sister Tachi.
Yes, Father. Yes, Father. He's going to continue. Father, you're going to continue. There must be some solution for those, if there's still time, to enter the ark before it's closed.
Yes, so we had been describing the spiritual state of the Catholic Church today, and we're basing the description of the Catholic Church from the liturgy. Because this has been prophesied by
Yes.
Christ, no? We have plenty of types which is described in the scriptures of what is going to happen today. So it should not surprise us what is happening today. Everybody's surprised what is happening in the United States with the scandal that is going on with the Catholic Bishops' Conference. And what I'm saying is, why are you surprised? What is new? This has been prophesied by Christ. It has happened in the past. It has happened in scriptures. It has happened during the time of Saint Peter Damian. Exactly what is happening today. And so we are analyzing what's happening today using the liturgy. That this has been prophesied, and so we should not be surprised. We should be expecting this to happen. As any good Catholic who knows his theology should expect. And so suddenly what happened, the big scandal in the United States has happened, and we're just saying, well, that's what's foreseen by the liturgy, that we're going to live in an age of great violence. So you see countries in the Middle East being attacked for no reason. Why is the United States, for instance, and the NATO forces, which is the European force, attacking Syria, who is not even invading any nations? Why are they threatening Iran, who is not attacking anybody? Or North Korea, threatening North Korea? So in other words, everybody is in a violent mood. Everybody wants to start a war, and so forth and so on. And if you ask what's happening in the world, and our answer is, well, the liturgy says it's going to happen.
Maybe the question is, what happened to humanity? Why they are acting so violently?
Violently, yeah.
Is that to fulfill prophecy?
Well, not really to. It's the other way around.
Oh, rather,
Another way
okay.
that Christ knew it was going to happen, so
okay.
he prophesied it.
Okay.
And of course, what happened in the United States is really sodomy. And further the investigation goes on, the more people are found to be committing the sin of sodomy, in the seminaries, among the priests, among the bishops, and so on. Not all of them, of course. There are always a few who are very good and so on like that. But the few are always repressed because this is precisely what happened on Good Friday. That those who could preach the truth could not preach because they were being threatened by the Romans, by the Jewish people, and so on. So we have these two sins, violence and sodomy, which is prefigured in the story of Noah and the story of Lot. But the liturgy also tells us the solution to it, what we must do. And we saw that Noah left the sinful world and entered the ark. Just as Lot left Sodom and Gomorrah, with his entire family. And the wife who was hesitant in leaving the place was punished by God, which could happen to any of us. Hesitant to leave this world of violence, this world of sodomy. But the question is, how do you live this world of violence and sodomy? Can you physically leave this place? Of course not. Because Christ himself said we are in the world, but we should not be of the world. But we are in the world. So we leave these places with our minds and with our free will, with our minds and with our hearts. That's how we live them.
That is your world within you. your mind and what's going in your heart, in your mind.
Yeah, it's a spiritual living of the
They
world.
say that there are two kinds of world outside of yourself and the world within yourself, your mind and your heart.
Yeah. Or the one inside you, you can just call them as the spiritual world. Those are your spiritual faculties. The mind and the heart are your spiritual faculties. You have to leave the world of violence and sodomy with your spiritual mind and your spiritual heart, not your physical mind or your physical heart. No?
It means that we need some kind of divine light so that our mind will be enlightened and our heart will do the will of God.
Well, before you can have this divine light, you have to live it first. You have to live this world of violence and sodomy.
I was just thinking, Father, you have to be pretty strong to stay within. Like if you were and one of the children stayed behind because you think you could fight it with your mind and heart, I think that would have been difficult, Father.
Well, if it was not yet the day of great distress,
Maybe.
that can be done.
Oh, that's what I was thinking.
You can wait for your
very
loved
well.
ones,
Okay.
adjust to them and so
but-
on. But during the day of great distress, you cannot
there's-
because you
there's-
might run out of time.
Yeah, so you have to do something because
Yeah.
this the bombardment of all this from all directions. Not easy for a person if you don't. Not easy.
Because Christ Himself said, if you are on the rooftop, don't even come down to get your clothing,
Okay.
and so forth and so on, Meaning to say, there is no time for anything else except to save your souls.
That's the one.
Because it's going to be a very distressful time that you have no time for anything else.
And if you give time to anything else, there's not time for your soul.
You would be overcome by it, yeah.
That's what I said, no?
That's the whole idea.
Okay.
People might ask, Father, I'm living in the world for many, many years. How come I could immediately leave the world and change myself?
Yeah. It's really near impossible.
Yes, Father.
It's really impossible. But in fact, the apostle said that, Christ says, you have to leave everything.
Yes,
This
Father.
world of violence, this world of sodomy, world of sin, this world whose prince is Satan, you have to leave it. And the apostle says, you have to leave it in order to be saved. And Christ says, yes. So the apostle said, Lord, if that's the case, who will be saved?
Yes, Father.
And that's what you're asking.
Yes, Father.
Who will be saved? And Christ says, with man, it's really impossible. I mean, for man,
Yes,
it's
yes.
impossible, but with God, nothing is impossible.
But what would make God change the heart and mind of people immediately?
Nice.
As you said, conversion
Yeah.
takes place. But if there is no more time and humanity wants to change so that they can enter the Ark of Noah, how's that, Father?
That's right. So the liturgy of the Mass on Saturday, 32nd weekday of the year, tells us how to do it. And that is by unceasing prayer.
Oh, yes.
It was a parable of the widow who went to the judge because she was being bothered by her enemy. So widow, bothered by her enemy, went to a judge and asked, please help me get rid of this enemy because he's bothering me and he could really overwhelm me. The widow is always the symbol of the Catholic Church because Christ is no longer on earth, he's already in heaven, so it's like a widow. No? Like that, she's a widow because he doesn't have anymore physically a husband. So the Catholic Church doesn't have a physical husband, so she is symbolized as a widow. And the enemy that was bothering her is the devil. Because the devil has been released by God and given extra powers, remember, to tempt her. So she goes and prays to God, Lord, with the devil bothering me, I could go to hell. Please help me. And God says, well, If you just keep on asking for help, keep on asking, willing to say, praying unceasingly, you will get it.
That unceasing prayer, Father, is it related to spiritual communion? Meaning to say your heart and mind is always focused on God?
Well, it's sort of, but it's not enough. That's why you have to leave the world of violence and the world of sodomy to enter the Catholic Church, to enter the Ark, which is a symbol of the monastic life. You know, in the early Catholic Church, when you ask the question, where's the Catholic Church? They always pointed to the monastic community. Because the monastic community is a group of people who are trying to become Catholics. That's the definition of a monastery. It's a group of lay people who are seriously trying to become Catholic. So when you ask where is the Catholic Church, they always pointed to the monastery. So you really have to leave the world of violence and sodomy and enter the monastery, because that's the only place where you can pray unceasingly. You cannot pray unceasingly in a world of violence, in a world of sodomy. Cannot.
That was the reason of Saint Benedict for setting up some kind of monastery or inviting lay people to be with him.
Yeah, and the first step he took was he has to leave the world. He had to leave Rome. It was almost a city of sin, where all sins are being committed. He has to leave. You have to leave. And Pope John Paul II, in his very splendid encyclical Veritatis Splendor, is the most splendid encyclical of the modern popes. Precisely the theme is to leave the world.
Father, we have only few monastery wherein they can run away from the world and stay there. How's that, Father? If there is only like Ariana or monastic life, if I want to, where will I go, Father?
Well, Saint John Chrysostom, he's one of the monks, early monks, John Chrysostom, promoter of the monastic life, had mentioned that if you know what you are supposed to do in a monastery, which is nothing else except the New Testament life of repentance,
That's
not the Old Testament repentance. It has to be the New Testament repentance. As long as you know how to do it, you can do it in your room at home.
If somebody asks how we do the New Testament repentance, Father.
Well, it's found in scriptures. It's called the New Testament way of prayer, which was taught by Christ. When the apostles asked him, Lord, teach us to pray, Christ taught them how to pray in the New Testament way. The New Testament fasting is spiritual fasting, which is the fasting of the five senses. And the spiritual good work is called the spiritual works of mercy.
You mentioned about the Bible. Is it found in the Sermon of the Mount of Christ in St. Luke's book?
Well, the Sermon of the Mount, which is the Beatitudes, is already advanced. It's no longer repentance. It's already at different degrees of faith, hope, and charity. It's no longer repentance.
you started giving the difference before, so maybe it'll be clearer for brother. When you said, for example, the old repentance is this way, the prayer is this way, vocal, you said. And then so you could, maybe Father, you could continue, because you stopped there the other episode. You stopped on prayer, then you got fasting and good work. Right now you said the spiritual, the New Testament. What is the Old Testament to be able to differentiate?
Yes. Catholics have the wrong impression that the repentance of the Old Testament, which you usually do when you go to confession, you put into practice the Old Testament repentance. That does not forgive sins. It does not. And St. John the Baptist said so, that his repentance does not forgive sins. What forgives sins is the New Testament repentance, which is purely spiritual. We mentioned the fact that the Old Testament repentance were purely physical, what the Pharisees were doing.
Yes, that's what she was saying.
Like they were praying vocally, the Psalms. They would fast, not eating food, not drinking. Their good works, they would give food to the hungry, clothing to the naked. Then Christ comes and teach everything in the spiritual level.
Father, we have only 30 seconds, please.
So, Pope John Paul II has given us the solution on how to solve and save your soul in an atmosphere where the world is guilty of violence, like in the time of Noah, and sodomy, like in the time of Lot. And the solution is to live. Just as Noah left the world and entered the ark, Lot and his family left Sodom and Gomorrah and went to the place where God pointed. Now, Pope Francis is doing the opposite. He's telling us not to enter the Ark of the Covenant, and he's telling us not to leave Sodom and Gomorrah. In fact, in the last Bishop Synod in the Vatican on the youth, he was telling the young people to get involved in welcoming all these sodomites.
Oh my God, that's terrible, Father.
So we have one Pope saying one thing and Pope Francis saying the opposite. So we have here one Pope and actually an anti-Pope because he's going against the teaching of a previous Pope.
We have no more time, Father. Excuse me. You can explain that, please, next episode. And thank you for watching Dialogues, Spiritual Dialogues with Father Udon de Castro. See you again. Thank you.
Hosanna, Hosanna.